questions because those who knew told the people what there was to know. Life was simple, actually. Eventually, people did ask, and the floodgates of questions opened. Progress is made through questions, not answers. But life is no more simple. In fact, the simpler the answers, the more complex life becomes. In science, we have moved from certainty of Newton's universe to the uncertainties and probability of Einstein's, and more questions about everything, only to find out that there isn't everything to know about anything, never mind about everything. This is where philosophy comes in. It isn't about finding definitive answers, but about the journey of thinking, exploring, and understanding, all done by asking. So questions begat other questions. The answers you get depend on the questions you ask, said Thomas Kuhn. If that is so, then knowledge is temporary and individual. In fact, questions are an epistemic issue. It is about knowledge. Today's silly chicken question is actually about knowledge. I think so. I put together some sort of different kinds of questions. Debbie, are you there? Yes, because I can't.
Yes, I just managed to
Okay, good.
come back.
Can you please let people in? I can't do both things at once. Okay, so there are different kinds of questions the way I can see them, but they're all connected. There's those for which you know the answer. For example, does God exist? There are those for which you think you know the answer. Does God exist? For those for which you pretend you know the answer, but you can't know it. For example, where is a particle before it is found, i.e. measured? There are those for which there is no answer. And there are those for which there cannot be an answer, or even there cannot be a question. Those last ones I will come to, and those are my favorite, and that's what all this really is about. But I suppose I should answer the main question. Why did the chicken cross the road? The answer is, of course, to get to the other side. Yes, but was it the same decision as a human would make? There can only be an anthropomorphic answer to an anthropomorphic question. Was it free will, if you believe humans have free will? Did the chicken think about it? Why would she want to get to the other side? Did the chicken remember something that had happened previously? Do chickens have an innate language facility like humans? Do they think? The real question is, what's it like to be a chicken? That is the question. But I often wonder whether every statement should have a question mark after it, or in Spanish before it, upside down. But of course they don't. By the way, have you noticed that politicians don't ask questions? They make statements, even when they ask questions. They seem to see questions as a sign of weakness. Get rid of questions so that we are left with the truth. And by the way, until the age of 4, children ask 200 to 300 questions a day. As adults, we ask about 3 questions a day. It's a common misconception that the more we know, the fewer questions we have left to answer. That is obviously not true. If it were true, the assumption is the inevitability of eventual full knowledge of everything. A similar assumption follows from the notion that better theories are constantly being pursued, that the main aim of scientists is to make progress. Will the best theory be the ultimately true one, representing so-called objective reality? I don't think that any honest scientist or philosopher believes that all questions will eventually be answered, and that we will be left with objective truth about everything. Instead, they ask questions knowing that they will be left with yet more questions. If we thought that all questions would eventually be answered, that would be the end of humans, the end of curiosity, and perhaps the beginning of an autonomous AI. Does AI answer questions because it wants to have answers? I'll leave that hanging. I'm sure Terry would like to jump in on that one. But questions are useful in many more ways than answers. Questions are about what we don't know, while answers are what we know. Questions get us to look forward, answers stop us. Questions are limited, though, and I will give some examples in a while. Arguably, the best current theory of physics is quantum mechanics, or various interpretations of it. Strange, though, the results, the answers, are probabilities with which we work quite successfully. My question is, isn't the answer to every question a probability? The connection is that everything that is observed is changed by observing them. The anthropologist Levi-Strauss understands that to study culture is to change it. Freud understands that doctors cannot evaluate patients' minds without affecting them. The paradox we are left with is that we never know more than we know. Even in the future, when we will know more than we know today, we won't know more than we know. And all that applies, by the way, even if what we know is inaccurate. This applies as well to our imagination and counters a statement made by Niels Bohr, one of the founders of quantum theory, that not only is the universe stranger than we think, it is stranger than we can think. But we can't think differently from what we can think. The universe cannot be stranger than we can imagine. In which way would that be a world at all? Where would we find it? Obviously, we couldn't. Something stranger than we can imagine is not only untestable, it is untestable because we can't imagine what we could test. Questions, then, are a way of sidestepping what we don't know in order to land on what we will know. In a way, it's an urge to time travel to the future, to a place where we will know what we don't know today. The puzzle, the paradox actually, is that we will never get there because when we do, we will know what we know, and the question will have been answered. We never get to tomorrow, in other words. That, by the way, is Ron's paradox to add to Zeno's paradoxes. Ours is an age of big questions. Not long ago, what is a woman? What is truth? Or how will democracy end? Would have seemed hopelessly abstract. Today, those questions have a charge of urgency. Our questions are biased towards getting the answers we'd like to receive, like does God exist? In an election season, the question, are you better off than you were in the past, or are things better today than they were 5 years ago? Almost nobody stops to think about the question itself. The question is immediately answered according to one's political leanings, or does climate change exist? Instantly answered without any thought. Questions are often more annoying, even lethal, than answers. Any question about free will or telepathy will cause a complete storm and breakup of any party you're in. Roland knows about this, how did you get to that opinion? It's about the worst thing you can ask somebody because they go absolutely crazy. They don't want to be asked that. Nobody knows how they get to their opinion. But they should. I ask questions to bridge the gap between philosophy and physics. It seems absurd that a while ago, physicists dug their heels in as the sole arbiter of answers, while philosophy was looked upon by physicists as at best the servant. Can there be a question that has never been asked, which is itself a question? There are questions of which we know the answer, and there are questions that are not questions but are observations. There was a famous incident at the University of Toronto when, after delivering a lecture, Paul Dirac was asked a question by a student. Dirac's response: "This is not a question, it's an observation. Next question, please." Now, we get to the part that I really want to get to. Questions that don't and can't have an answer. What will happen is one of those questions. We can make predictions, but we'll not know if they are right until after we've arrived at what was the future. In other words, we can never actually get to the future. Or what is it like to be dead? This brings us to what I call the epistemic void. Now, wake up, everybody. Here comes the epistemic void. The epistemic void does not describe a lack of knowledge or information about a particular subject or topic. It is no knowledge. While it would indicate that there are limits to human understanding, an epistemic void does not describe subjects or objects about which there is no knowledge. It's impossible to ask a question. It does, therefore, not describe the limits of human understanding, since to do so would be to describe what an epistemic void is. And neither is it a not, nor a not is. An epistemic void does not exist because there is a complete absence of an observer, and hence nothing that can refer to what isn't. There's no observer. So silence or empty space do not constitute epistemic voids, since there would have to be an observer of silence or of empty space. There is, in other words, no knowledge of what we don't know. So I just want to mention this tree in the forest thing, which I always like to mention. It always works. The original question was, if a tree falls in the forest and no one knows about it, does it make a sound? I'm passing that because obviously it doesn't. But I won't argue with you about that. I made it more difficult, more apt. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody knows about it, did it fall? So, did it fall? That is a question. There's no knowledge about the tree. Nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about it. Nobody. Did it fall? My answer is no. But you might have different opinions about that one. Okay. Where does nothing come into this? Nothing is being the absence of everything. It doesn't. It can't. We can't ask questions about the absence of everything. Nothing isn't an is, and it isn't an it. There is nothing to ask questions about. We can't even say that nothing is an epistemic void. We can't say it because we're not there. There's an absence of us. The epistemic void is unobservable and untestable. It is unknowable, and it is so even though we know what it is that is unknowable. The epistemic void. Do you see the unavoidable paradox here? If you ask me what an epistemic void is, I will tell you, which I just have. But I can't, because the epistemic void includes my absence. So my explanation would give it an observer, which is me. And even that sentence isn't valid, because an epistemic void does not even include my absence. And note that I sometimes mention an epistemic void when there can only be the epistemic void. Now, here's a ridiculous question. Why is there something rather than nothing? Pondered over from earliest times, first in connection with God and belief systems, and over a few hundred years over a question that Heidegger famously characterized as the most fundamental issue of philosophy, or that philosopher Bede Rundle called philosopher's central and most perplexing question. The question, though, is why it is being asked at all. It's certainly not an unanswerable question. It would be unanswerable if we weren't alive to ask it. Says philosopher Galen Strawson, it would have been simpler if there'd been nothing. There wouldn't be anything to explain. Right? You know what I think about that. The point, though, is not that there wouldn't be anything to explain, but there wouldn't be anyone to explain anything. It certainly is a strange question, since it requires the answers to what would have happened if nothing had happened. In a personal context, it would be asking, what would have happened if we had not been born? There is no answer to a question that cannot be posed, for the reason that we wouldn't be around to pose it. It's not a matter of statistics for there to be a world for nature to exist and for us to be here. The wonder in the fact that we were born is, in other words, empty. What the question, why is there something rather than nothing, is actually, why is there anything apart from us, from me? But that does not have even the veneer of profoundness. Everything around us is part of what we are, of our thoughts, feelings, and very essence. The more we know, the more there is, not the less there is. Perhaps the question, where are we, should be refined to, where do we feel we are, physically and mentally? A question so simple as to not seem worthwhile asking. Perhaps that is the question. And here I will stop. I think I'm in my time, and there are people still not on their videos. Christine, I'm pleased you came. You made the right decision.
Ron,
Okay.
make me co-host again. Ron?
Oh.
I had to log off and log in again, and that cut me off. So
Okay. Wait a minute, I'm going to admit some people. 1 second, I'm going to find you here. There you are. You keep on moving, Debbie.
it's more interesting mingling with everyone.
Ah, mingling, true. 1 second, make her host. Right. Okay, so now there are questions. Oh, Richard, you're first. But if we could hear you, if we could hear the question, it would be...
Sorry, I muted it because the sound of the TV in the background might have interrupted us. Okay. First about chickens. Having bred and kept chickens, I can assure you chickens don't have a single thought in their heads. They just wander anywhere. They're impossible to herd or anything else. Second, about AI. In the very beginning of AI, I'm sure Terry and other people will come in with later versions, but in the beginning, it's because the way the programming languages, Prolog and Lisp, worked. They will always answer questions so long as they can find them when they retrace their steps and the database has an answer. So if you've programmed them so that you say Elizabeth I was the daughter of Henry VIII, then that will come out. But you have to first program it. Basically, the whole thing is set up so it will do it. As I understand it, even with the large scale ones now, they have much larger databases and their search engines are far more complicated, but it's a way that it's been programmed. It's not true intelligence at all. Now, I may be wrong because I've been out of the whole thing for 20 years or so. And as soon as I got out, I preferred to leave it. Right. Now, going to a couple of the other things, the more important questions, I would have thought that your idea about questions and answers, I would have thought that Gödel rather got there in saying that the stronger the system of logic, if you like, or mathematics you have, the more questions can be asked that can't be answered within it. And my own feeling is that, in fact, questions would have come from as soon as speech, or even before speech. Oh, can't see you any longer, Ron.
You can't? I can see me.
Back. Yeah, you disappeared for a bit.
Oh.
Anyway, I would have said that way back, early man, as soon as we sort of started moving down from the trees and crossing the veldt and so on, people would point at an animal. And that, I mean, if you look at monkeys, if you look at the apes, they will point out dangers to each other. Birds have alarm calls. I would have said we started to query what was around us first, among the first things we did. Okay, going on from where I said about Gödel, you asked about the way that democracy is being challenged. I would have said, once again, to quote someone else, Popper brought out the paradox of tolerance. And the fact is that the more open a society is, the more you have to allow people to pose questions that you don't like. For instance, I've never actually wanted to read, say, Hitler's Mein Kampf, but you can't ban it because anything that's been written needs to be there available for scholars to access. I have read a bit of various philosophers, including Marx, but I know lots of people who would want to ban Marx and Marcuse and various other people. Once you start banning people, then you become an intolerant society. You're no longer open. So therefore, and that would lead to my last thing, I think from what you said, that it's rather like, as I understand it, Einstein's theory about the universe. We're always bounded, but the whole universe is infinite. In other words, the knowledge that we've got has got a boundary around it at any one time. Neither you nor I nor anyone else can tell where that boundary is, but there is a boundary, but it can keep on being stretched and stretched and stretched. I think that's probably about all I've got to say. It's been rather incoherent, but I didn't write
it. Thank you. First of all, the chickens, you don't know what is in chickens' head. They might say, all these humans around, they don't know what they're doing. They're running around after me. They're completely crazy, or they've got nothing in their heads. That's the first thing. The last...
You don't know chickens, mate.
You're right. I don't. It was just a thing. I've been working on knowledge for a long time, and I also wonder whether it can be limitless, whether it really can be limitless, as let's say the physical part of humans. Can humans ever run kilometers in 2 seconds, for example? Is that possible? I'm not saying whether it is or isn't. I'm saying that there might be a limit to knowledge. There might be. It's one of the things I've been worrying about, but I do worry about silly things anyway. So thank you very much, Richard.
But do we have to be human to go on developing knowledge? I mean, you're taking it that our human limitations will limit knowledge. My argument would be that maybe we'll have a hybrid between humanity and AI in 1,000 years' time. Maybe there will be a new development. You can't tell. But knowledge, one can go on discovering things as long as there are brains. It doesn't matter. Maybe it's an octopus.
Well, let's say that there's an alien.
Yeah.
And it's so different that we just won't recognize it's an alien. We just won't it won't mean anything to us at all. Now that stretched our knowledge above, beyond what we can imagine. What we can't imagine, and that's it. And there may be aliens around us. We just don't see them. That's an example, I think.
Right. So if I would get you on mine.
Anyway, thank you, Richard. Kerry, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. This is a great way to start out my Sunday morning. So first, I want to stand in defense of chickens as a proud chicken parent as well. And I'm going to rely on the principle of charity, which I realize is not necessarily a knowledge claim, but I think if we can deduce that they have a similar brain structure and chemistry and behavior in a certain circumstance, that implies a similarity of experience. And I have witnessed my chickens definitely have behaviors that have analogs to human behaviors, such as an unfortunate event where a raccoon got into their enclosure and killed one of them, and the others were there to witness. They clearly had PTSD after that. They were hiding in their coop and were very frightened, and it was very, very sad. So I was a terrible chicken father at that point, but their coop is now secure. The second point I wanted to make, and maybe the more important one, you mentioned the epistemic void. And what I'm wondering, isn't this really just an unknowable set? We'll call it a set of mystery. And the label that we put on that is metaphysics, right? Or do I have it wrong?
If you're talking about an epistemic void, I can't answer the question.
But we don't have to talk about what's in it to define the set.
But there is nothing in it because it's not an it.
Sure, it's a place that we cannot
Not a
see
place.
beyond.
Not a place.
So are there So you're going to say that there is no set if we're going to use set theory language.
Well, when we can't, not with epistemic void. It's a void. There's no knowledge. You can't use anything that you know. You just can't use it. There is no it and there's no is. It's a void.
So if I say something like pi is a non-repeating decimal that we cannot know the full extent of, is that an accurate statement?
It has nothing to do with epistemic void, though.
Well, the actual number would be in the void, and at least in terms of a human internalization.
No, but you can see it written down. I'm talking about something really weird, and it's not even weird. It just isn't.
All right.
That was a very that was a difficult point that I made because I couldn't have made it really.
So if I say the set of unknowable objects, have I created an error?
Yeah, it's not a set. There's no set. I mean, that's the way I see it. I got to. It's a very difficult position to take because you've got to take a position about something that doesn't exist, and you're there to do it. So you're in a great loop that gets you into, as you say, metaphysical stuff, and there's no getting out of it. Because if you are in epistemology, then you've reached some very, very difficult stage here because you've taken it away. You've taken away knowledge.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a boundary problem, like an event horizon.
Yeah, okay. But I don't go for that either because there would be no horizon and no event for there to be an horizon of.
Right. You can approach it, but never touch it.
Only if it's an it. There's nothing to approach. Sorry.
All right. Thank you. I must dwell on this further.
Please do. Thank you, Kerry. Michael, good to see you again.
Hi. A few comments. First, I'd like to take an evolutionary approach to this and note that we probably, humans, developed our ability to ask questions in order to solve very practical problems that made sense. But once we develop this mental capacity to ask questions, it allowed us to generate all kinds of questions, and many of them, and maybe even most of them, would not be related to any problems that would make sense from practical standpoint. So we can ask all kinds of crazy questions that would not make sense. Then people created the whole this field of philosophy and maybe other even more mystical spaces for asking these meaningless questions. But in the realm of science, we still can ask some questions not related to any practical problems, but that can be, at least in principle, grounded in something observable, something measurable. And this way we can impose some limits and maybe not always come to the answers to these questions, but at least to filter what questions may lead to productive directions and what may be meaningless. and ultimately to find answers to some of these questions, but at least tentative answers. But then back to your question about why the chicken crossed the road. The main problem to me in this question is not with a chicken, but with why. What do you mean under why? So are you asking about the immediate cause or the whole chain of causation in chicken's sensory system and chicken's brain and the environment and so on? So in this case, probably the question is not answerable because you cannot know all these things. Now another possibility of interpreting this why, that maybe you mean this goal of the chicken. And this opens another can of worms. How do you define the goal? And what is the goal, and how you connect this teleological explanation with cause and effect explanation? But anyway, that's another interpretation. Now, how are we dealing with this kind of questions in sciences like physics? We find some ways to measure these things, to collect the evidence, maybe to run the experiments. Maybe experiments with chickens still can be ethical, maybe not all experiments, but some of them. And then we find the best connections between our observations and the question that we want to ask. Now, even if we understand why in terms of cause and effect, it's not trivial to derive the cause and effect relationships from statistical or probabilistic data. And there is the whole area of statistics called causal inference or something like this. I could recommend a book, The Science of Why, which describes this. I don't remember the author, but it's not trivial, not easy. But sometimes this can be done. That you can establish not just correlations, but you can prove that the relationship between A and B is causal. So A is the cause of B, but this is not always possible. Now, in quantum theory, this becomes even trickier because, well, you mentioned that from quantum mechanics we only get the probabilities, but even this is not exactly what is happening there. We cast in terms of probabilities the statistical outcomes of interactions between quantum system and its classical environment. And this was the big insight. I don't remember who it was, Bohr or someone else suggested this interpretation of the wave function. But the real description of a quantum system in quantum mechanics is the wave function, which does not have the classical interpretation. And the best that we can propose is like a distribution of propensities of systems' behavior in interaction with other systems. And if we take it seriously, I would say that the only interpretation of this, that in every interaction, the quantum system makes a choice. Maybe not in an anthropomorphic sense of this, but it makes a choice in objective sense that this interaction limits the phase space of this system. So at the limit, we call it the collapse of the wave function. So from the whole wave function, we have only one definite state. or in quantum entanglement, it may not be one state of the whole system, but it can be the relationship between states of the parts of the system.
Michael, can
But-
I interrupt you here and then you can come back later because other people, is that okay?
Yeah, but unfortunately I have to leave in 15 minutes. I'm about to finish.
Okay.
So now another insight, which is a fairly recent insight, is so-called relational quantum mechanics. I can maybe recommend a book about this by Carlo Ravelli, who invented this. And his main idea is that all description of quantum systems is relational in the same sense as in relativity theory. So it's observer dependent. And for humans, human brain, so everything is a quantum system. And human brain is a quantum system. Big or small, it does not matter. And what follows from this, that if what you called epistemic void is simply the absence of interaction between the observer and some another system. This is the epistemic void, but only from this observer's standpoint. So you cannot say whether the tree fell or not, because you had no interaction with this tree. You cannot even say maybe whether this tree is there. But once you have the interaction, you can get some information through this interaction about the state of another system, say of this tree, and you can say something meaningful about this.
But Michael, as soon as you say you've got rid of the epistemic void.
Yes.
Okay, so that's something else. In any case, the reason I put in the chicken question is just to demonstrate that anything that you put out there, you can discuss and you can go into it, and you can use your minds to go into a whole lot of stuff, and you mentioned quite a few of them. That's the only reason I put in a very, very silly thing that everybody thinks is very funny. But there's a lot to ask here. A lot to ask. A lot.
Yes.
But
yes.
anyway,
yes.
thank you very much, Michael. I'm sorry you have to leave soon, but thank you. That's it. Very, very interesting. Ak, do you have a video camera? Ak, are you there? You got your hand up. Turn up. Hello? Can anybody hear me? Are people hearing me, by the way? Oh, good. Ak,
Yeah.
are you there? Ak, your hand is there. You must be somewhere. Right. Olga, good to see you again. I don't think you can hear me. Can people hear me or not?
No, I heard.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I can.
Mark has even his audio on, so I'm not sure why he does not hear you. Okay. Hi, guys. First, I would like to say that, Ronald, you always asking question that that could be discussed absolutely endlessly. And you are very good in this. And second is I already agree with Kerry from Seattle that he was talking about set theory. And set theory, actually, in the beginning of set theory, there was group of Russian mystics, 19th century, I think, or even 18th century. They were saying we cannot know what God is, but we could name God, and it became operatable. And so they were in the beginning of this set theory, they created this, they start to create it. Okay, so so that's the point is that you cannot know, you cannot have any understanding of knowledge of everything, that you still can name it, it's became operatable. Second, what I would like to say about relativity the theory that you say that is probably the right now kind of more theory that could explain most in what is observable by us. But from my point of view, that the I'm sorry, I have a phone and I cannot stop it. Okay, so it will stop in some time. So probably the main thing from my point of just point of general public, not scientists or anybody else who knows more about probability theory, that what is give us and what give to science and scientists, it was said, there is something that good enough. You should not shoot for the absolute certainty. There is something good enough if we, again, could operate with this. We could do something with this. And we don't care what is actually exact answer to this question. And thing I would like to say, and of course it's, I would agree what Michael said, that it was, he came to this from evolutionary point of view. There is for everything that's happening, there is some kind of reason and practical reason in our case. And also I would like to say one of the first thing that you said, you ask buy chicken across the road, but real question you said, what is to be a chicken? Well, it could probably also be not probably understood, but actually we could observe their behavior and have some experience in being in biological body. So, but actually the real question is not this. And it's probably first time that I disagree with you in every your discussions. The real question is what to be, what is to be. And when we could answer this, if we could answer this question, and if we could answer this question, what is to be? And not as Michael said, why, not as you said, what is to be chicken, but is actually what is to be. That's, and before we answer this question, we could not say anything about existence of anything. For example, existence of God. Okay, forget about God, but what does mean to exist? That's it. Thanks.
Well, that's a good question. What it means to exist, as far as I'm concerned, you're asking an ontological question, and my view is that epistemology comes before ontology. If you don't know, then there's no existence. That's putting it in a nutshell. That's the conclusion
Sorry.
I came to a while ago.
Ron, is it another way to say that to exist is to have experience or to feel something?
To know.
How you have to have any experience and know what experience is if you don't know what is to be?
No. I know I exist. I know that what I'm looking at now exists. I for something to exist that I don't know about, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. How can something exist that you don't know about? I mean, how? For whom would it exist? It has to exist for somebody, for something. If there's no something, there's no existence. It's like the tree that I mentioned.
So
Right?
it's the question of it's again, it's relative and it's good enough. We could answer any question good enough, not precisely, but good enough. So it's kind of that, and philosophy trying to get to the precision, to close it, close something that unreachable. That's probably.
No, on the contrary. On the contrary, if I say not knowledge means if I say that you can't, something can't exist if you don't know about it. That's all I'm saying. Is I have to ask, if you say it exists and you don't know about it, what does it exist for? For whom? For what? So I cannot see how existence can come before knowledge. But that's a very, very short way of how I look at things. Right? I just doesn't make sense to me there to be something that I don't know. How can it be there? For what? For whom? That's all I'm saying. But it's a very short point about many years of thought. I'm not saying this is correct. All right. As far as I'm concerned, it is, but that doesn't mean anything, really. But anyway, but we can continue that discussion. But the whole point of questions is it's knowledge. It's a way of getting to knowledge, or at least having knowledge in order to ask something, about chickens, about what it is. If you don't know that there's a thing called a chicken, the chicken does not exist as far as you're concerned. There's no such thing. Okay. Right?
Okay.
It's just way of looking at life.
I have to know before I could ask the question.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to get back. Claudio, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you. Yeah, interesting meeting. Haven't seen you in a while.
True.
Things seem to appear to improving over there. Yes, you mentioned earlier, like life was simpler a long time ago. There were fewer questions as a result. So the farther back you go in time, the brain was less developed, of course. Like, for example, it took humans, the hominins, according to the experts, 1 million years before they became aware of their own death.
My brain
Right?
was much more developed a few years ago than it is now, by the way.
Well, okay.
It's a joke.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
I hope so.
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Of course, yeah, funny. Yeah, so like for example, you take the infant, which has an undeveloped brain, right? Cannot come up with any question because doesn't possess the knowledge, the experience. And children, young kids, they may ask questions, but they're not really like deep, important questions that can lead to, inventions or discoveries. Yeah, I think as humans progressed, their brains became more complex. They became, they developed autobiographical memory, consciousness, and so on. They were able to discover things, and they were able to ask really deep questions about it. Like, for example, once they discovered that they not only they saw other people dying, animals, they're members of their tribes, but they never sank in that they themselves would eventually die. So they once they discovered death, that it was actually a real thing. All kinds of questions came up. What happens when you die? And myths arose out of that too. Myths, you know, which became part of the human identity, and it influenced future civilizations. Myths. And you know, like, is there a God? Some people would bury their dead with good, because they ask the questions: do we need to feed our dead relatives once they die in the new realm that they enter? So you find archaeologists would discover dead people with good, even jewelry and all kinds of stuff. And you know, like, and each invention too. Like, I'll just mention one invention: the microscope. Once the microscope was invented, we were able to discover new things, like microorganisms that are not visible with the human eye. You need the microscope. So very important questions arose. What do these microorganisms do? Do they cause disease, or do they actually help cure diseases? You know, antibodies, for example, and all these things. And they were able to ask other questions, like they were able to figure out, can we use this information to predict, based on, like, say, the blood markers, you know, red blood cell count and all that, the duration of a disease. You know, how long does this person have left to live? And they were able to come up with all kinds of new treatments, appropriate treatments. That's just one example of an invention that's important, that has saved over the years. A microscope has saved like billions of lives if you go back further. You go, like, very important discovery. A lot of discoveries, and the more questions, the more discoveries, the more inventions, the more questions arise, and the more civilization is able to advance. So questions lead to greater knowledge, and it leads to a more advanced civilization. And now with AI, which is going to profoundly change the world, and there's an expert, Ray Kurzweil, who predicts, like, in 5 years, each year that we lose, AI will be able to give you 1 year back. So it kind of like stops the aging process. And he's involved in a lot of important projects. Ray Kurzweil, right?
Yeah, many, many times wrong.
Ray Kurzweil.
Many times wrong. But anyway.
Well, yeah. So the questions are very important because they lead to other discoveries, and they lead to improvements in current discoveries, inventions. So, but you need a developed brain. Without the brain the way it is, then you can't really, uh, you can't really advance. So,
Thank you
yeah,
very
that's
much.
it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Claudia.
Yeah.
Thank you. William, Bill. Hey, how are you?
How are you, Ron?
I'm okay, thank you. Fine.
Well, I want to go back to the epistemological void. I work on, I think about philosophy occasionally, and it makes me think that there are two kinds of verbal behavior. One is reference talk about physics and things, and you use words to refer to facts, and you evidence-base them, and you make decisions about them because they're facts. And then there's something called, I call it interverbals. And it seems to me an whatever calling void is an interverbal. It's not referenced in the way that physics is referenced. It's a construction of words. And we get tied up in so many non-referential things by assuming they're referential. And I'm just not clear, Ron, if the void is a reference problem for you and it's not for me. I look at it as something interverbal, and I look at most philosophy as interverbal. And it's fun to look at it. It's a recreation for me to look at interverbals that are inventive, but it's not reference stuff. It's not physics.
That's the whole point, though.
What?
That's the whole point, that it's not a reference.
Well, that's fine. And then let's get off the notion that you're referencing a void. Why can't you just get off that idea that you have to have a reference? Because I think so many things you say assumes a reference.
I don't have to have a reference for
Good.
that particular thing. We're talking about knowledge, and I'm mentioning something that you can't have knowledge of, which is hugely problematic for me.
But yes, you can't have. Can you have knowledge of an interverbal? No. It's a construction. But you can't have knowledge of physics. You can't have knowledge of evidence in a trial.
Exactly.
What?
Exactly. That's why I'm mentioning this very weird thing, and it's not even a thing. I'm mentioning it because I think that we should think about it. It is not an it. We're thinking about our non-existence basically, and many of us think about that.
Yes.
Even though there's nothing to think about.
I think so many people will talk about assuming that an interval has a reference. It doesn't. And you agree on that? Yes.
Yes.
And so how many things do you think of in the question, do you have an epistemological void, or other questions like, paradigms and things like that? Can you have a reference for patterns? Probably not. Can you have a reference for struggles for existence? Probably not. They're interverbal constructions. Can you have a reference for id, ego, and superego? No. They help you interpret stuff, but they don't have a reference. And that's the difference between reference theory on one hand and interverbal theory on the other. And I think that's the point that we have to get clear on. And you need to know where that divide to get through the stuff, because you get fucked up over it. Oh, sorry. You get screwed up.
It's okay. It's accepted here.
But that's
it's okay. There's nobody here, I think, would object to that, whatever that was. No, fair enough, Bill. I see what you're getting at, but sometimes what I at least want to get beyond what is being referenced. There's somewhere there must be something that isn't. I can't get to it because I am.
Well, wait a minute, you can interpret about anything that doesn't exist, right? That's what metaphysics is about, right? That's all those theories that Hegel came up with and others came up with are interverbals. And you can't get it. To ask for a reference is to make a mistake, an intellectual mistake, I think.
Yeah, okay, but I'm not very keen on this thing. It's all just semantics. I think it's beyond that. That's the point. Now it's possible to not worry about these things, which most people don't. The people who do are crazy enough to come to the first Sunday of the month.
Right.
To hear.
I worry about the boundary between interverbals and reference.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. No, fair enough. Thank you very much. That's a good point. Roland, do you mind? Where's he gone?
He's here.
No, not you. Wait a minute. There was something. Do you mind if I ask Nick? I think Nick is the first time you're here, right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Is it okay if Nick comes in now? Because he's new, etc. Nick, I don't want you to wait so long. So
hello, it's Dominic. Sorry, I changed my name when the whole Zoom bombing happened. So I've been here before, to be fair.
In that case,
I'm happy to queue, but I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, you go for it. You got a different name or a different person. It's okay.
Okay. Good. Okay, so I think what comes to mind, I think, there's a scientist and philosopher, he's called David Deutsch, you probably heard of him.
Yep.
And I think he would talk about knowledge without a knower. There's some books where he talks about this concept, and don't quote me on this, but I think it goes basically down the road of the idea of, let's say, DNA, and whether you have information that consistently propagates in time. And then you could call that knowledge. So I think some conundrums possibly arise. One, because I think what William mentioned, due to use of language, I think I would agree with that. But some may arise if basically you would be making use of different definitions of what knowledge is in your mind. And then you run into paradoxa, right? So for example, that you cannot talk about the absolute nothing, or that is a sort of unknowable. But when this happens, I would suggest to kind of investigate how you actually define knowledge. And the second idea I would have in my mind would be to talk about knowledge without a knower. So basically the idea with DNA is that you have a system that consistently propagates in time and has a way of copying information from one carrier to the other, right? And when this basically happened before, I mean, even if you look at the human species that we ascribe consciousness to, whether it's there or not, but as far as we know, we on the planet Earth, we only ascribe it to the Homo sapiens, yeah, that something was already happening that was forwarding information in time before the human existed as we know it. So even if you would argue that the knower is required, then in order to produce the knower, you would need some kind of process, right? And that process would need to make use of knowledge in a way that doesn't actually require knower, because how do you reproduce the knower in the first place? In that sense, you know, I would say that in terms of the question, what comes first, what is more foundational, you know, epistemology or ontology, you could then go back and say that ontology comes first because of that reason.
Thank you, Nick. I'm not arguing with you. I'm arguing with David, with Deutsch. How can he say that there can be knowledge without a knower? Where does the knowledge, where the knowledge is floating around in the air? People say very strange things, and they expect to be taken seriously because they're well known. But what does it mean for there to be knowledge without a knower?
I try to be quick. So I think one system is if a system has knowledge of previous states. So let's say you break a glass, right? And there should be a way by applying the same rules of physics just to reverse in time t, you know, to reconstruct the original configuration of the glass, right? But if the all the matter of the glass gets dispersed in such a way, I don't know which way, but such that even if you apply the rules to its remnants, maybe, you know, it's something with dispersion of energy and how that you cannot reconstruct a previous state, then this entire system lost the knowledge of this configuration. But in a subtle way, actually, if you have a system like the broken glass and you would break it and break it, if you have 1 trillion pieces, and it doesn't look like a glass anymore, it just looks like a cloud of dust, then you could say that this cloud of dust has knowledge of its previous states, like the normal glass, it has knowledge of it. Because sort of all that made the glass is still encoded in different states, like the velocities of particles and whatever in that gas, in that particle gas, and therefore it sort of has knowledge, because you can just apply the same rules and then reconstruct its previous states, and in that sense it has knowledge and without a knower.
So you're saying that things can happen and there's no observer. You're in a way, you're talking about panpsychism, that these bits of glass have knowledge and they've got some sort of soul, some sort of self, some sort of consciousness. I use not you, but Deutsch is actually saying that tiny bits of glass can know things and we're not around, and that glass can know things and with no observer. I mean,
I dare say that's a leap into panpsychism, which I don't think is necessarily necessary if you want to talk about knowledge without a knower. But I don't want to stretch my time. There's probably others.
No, it's okay. No,
but it's an interesting. I like where you're going with it anyway.
No, it's very interesting. All I want to say is that I'm not impressed by words of famous people. Personally, I'm not, because some of the stuff that comes out is amazing and not in a nice way. Now, for somebody to say that there can be knowledge without a knower is beyond my brain. I just don't get it. Somebody will have to explain to me how there can be knowledge when there's nobody to know. I mean, you know, there's no observer. There's bits of glass, say. I mean, that to me is just very strange. I'm interested. I would like him to come here and explain it to us. I'm sure he's got lots of words, but that's fine. But no, I just, you know, I try to break not the glass, but if I break a glass, I'm the one who's breaking the glass. I can't imagine a glass being broken on its own with no observer. What does that mean? Because you are talking about the glass being broken, and you're also saying you can, those are your words, keep on smashing it and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But you're the one who's the observer discussing it, if you see what I mean. I'm talking about epistemology here. Are you still here? I can't see you.
Yeah, I'm just being mindful of my time, but I
right,
will say is that you...
Sorry, you moved across the screen.
Yeah, I'm queuing again. But I would say you are assuming that consciousness exists, and also I think you're using different definitions of knowledge.
Very possible.
And I think that causes... Yeah.
Very, very, very possible. So that's another long talk. But you're right.
Could I say something very quick? Okay, does embryo or sperm has any knowledge and be an observer?
I've got no idea.
For example.
I don't know.
So that's probably the question. Do sperm has some kind of knowledge? Or do embryo has some kind of knowledge developing in the womb? And is it observer? So that's the question. For example, as Dominic asking something like this.
Those are good questions. But this is a discussion about questions. That's a good one. I can't answer that. I don't know. It
just would come on my mind when Dominic.
Fair enough. It's a good question. Where does knowledge start? I don't know. We've got there are lots of theories. Where is Roland? Roland, are you still here? You've moved down.
I know.
It was
I've moved down in the world.
No, it was your
I'm
turn.
in Norway now.
It was your turn. You can't get away with it. Thank
you. Wow. I had some quite organized thoughts before Nick started talking, and then that kind of was like a rock going into a pond.
I have that effect on people. It's okay.
I think the problem with the thing that Nick said is that it is yet another attempt to get beyond ourselves, and by kind of changing the words we are using to describe ourselves and trying to apply them to something that isn't ourselves. So knowledge, what does it mean? Well, I suppose my starting point with all these things is that whatever we identify, whatever it happens to be, knowledge, existence, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is that's being identified is being identified by us, not by someone else. If I start to talk about what something else has identified, I'm stepping outside the scope of my experience and just projecting onto that thing in a way that I can never test. I can't actually sit in the same position as that thing that I'm wondering about and know what's going on for it. And this is very frustrating, I guess. But you know, I don't know a way around that. If anyone happens to know how to do that, then it would be interesting to hear from them. So I start from the premise that all the definitions that we happen to set up for the things that we experience in life, for the ideas that we have in life about philosophical notions and so forth, these are all things that we create, that we observe or don't observe. So going to I'd like to sort of retrace back to what Kerry was talking about. He's vanished from his screen at the moment, but Olga also touched on this. And this relates to set theory. This is something I've been thinking about for a long, long time now, and its relationship to consciousness and perception. And So I think I can probably best start on that by looking at the other side of questions, which is the answer. How do we know that we've got an answer to something? And we can experiment with that ourselves very easily. We can ask ourselves a question and then wonder what it is, what happens when we actually get an answer to that question. Like I might say, where is my pen? Here it is. Here it is. Right. So that's a very simple question and answer relating to a physical thing. But what is the difference? What is actually happening when I answer the question? Now, I have an expression I use for this, which is called instantiation, which I have borrowed from computer science, I'm afraid. But basically, I have here an instance of a pen happening. In other words, I'm referring, when I get an answer to something, I'm referring to an event occurring. And that event is an experience I'm having, which is consistent with the idea of a pen. Now, the problem here is that there is this notion of a pen, and there is this type of experience which gives me the answer, or gives me an instance of that pen. And these two things are completely different, in the same way that in set theory, the criteria for a set is completely different from membership of the set. They are two utterly different ideas. So one of the questions, or one of the thoughts I had some years ago was, how do you actually, is it possible to apply set theory to perception in a way that makes that usable in that sphere? So the parallels I could see are that when we conceive of a set of criteria, that corresponds to the definition of a set. But membership of a set in this idea corresponds to an event happening. And by an event, I mean some kind of experience that's a human experience, not something that we objectify. Like, for example, if we talk about the set of all oranges, I've objectified all the oranges. And how will I ever know what's in the set of all oranges? But if I talk about the set of my experiences of oranges, then I can actually have membership of that set by experiencing an orange. So I felt this is a very simple model, which basically means that I can set a bunch of criteria, and then I can look for an event that will satisfy those criteria. So I can say, is there a tree in my garden? Well, I know what a tree is, I know what a garden is. I have an idea of visiting the garden to see if there's a tree there. So these are all possible things that I can do. And in order to instantiate the answer to that, I can go into the garden and see the tree in the garden. At that point, I am having an experience of all those criteria happening at once. And therefore, I have an instance, right? So what I'm saying here is that instantiation is it's a type of experience, whereas the criteria are not, they are conceived of experiences. So they're projections into the future of something that might happen. There are all sorts of background issues with this as well. When we conceive of something happening in the future, it can never happen in that way, because our conception of the future is not the same as an instance of it happening. So, for example, we've all stood up from a chair. If I say, please stand up, everyone knows what I mean. But every time you stand up, it's different. Every single time it will be different. And if you actually try to analyze what's happening when you stand up each time, you would never succeed. It's too complex. And yet within that simple idea, stand up, we can encapsulate millions of different types of experience. So from that very simple example, we can see that when we set some criteria, when we conceive of a future happening, it is extremely superficial. It is like a set of all oranges, or a set of oranges, where we're basically ignoring all of the differences between the members of that set and taking just a handful of criteria in order to define what might be in it. So when I'm looking for my pen, well, I have a whole history of ideas about what a pen is. And this particular one I'm holding is just one instance of it. And even as I'm holding it, it's changing and I'm changing. And yet that type of experience where my present experience is in some way set against the set of criteria, I can call instantiation. Or another way of talking about it is knowledge. I know this is my pen. But here is another weird thing, and that is that knowing this is my pen now, and for example, my pen is now gone, but I know it's behind my computer. I'm using the same word. I know it's behind my computer. But it's not the same type of experience because I have to go and find it and look for it. So we unfortunately use the same word for imagining a future event happening and saying, oh yes, I know that's going to happen, and actually instantiating it, where we actually make it happen. So here is a blur between theory and test. We're basically using the same word for the same thing. For two different things. We're using a word to describe a theory. My pen is behind my computer. Oh, that I know that. And then we test it by picking up the pen. I know this is my pen. It's the same word. But we have failed to make the distinction between the two things. And those two things are completely different. Completely different. So, well, something else I wanted. Yeah. So, yeah, I wanted to touch on this idea of whether it is possible to talk about the impossible. And my answer, I don't know whether I differ with Ron on this one or not. We have had this discussion before. I think it is possible to talk about impossible criteria. So I can talk about a square circle, and I can give it a name. I can call it a squircle. I can talk about an unfindable object. I can call it a ziggle. Why not? What am I doing there? I'm basically taking a bunch of criteria and putting them together. But my question is it possible for an event to occur where all those things are happening at once? Now, if my criteria in my set are defined so as to be mutually exclusive, then I know with absolute certainty, 100% certainty, I know the event I'm trying to predict cannot happen. So if I have a square and a circle and I say I want something that's both, because those two things are defined in such a way as to be mutually exclusive, I know it's impossible for that event to occur. So I can talk about it as a thing, even though it isn't one. So I can also talk about being able to observe something and not being able to observe something, and put them together as a set of criteria, and yet what's inside? Nothing. There's no event that could occur which could match those criteria. So that's the way I would talk about it, in that you've got the possibility of describing a set of criteria which you can deduce can never happen.
But
I'm going to stop there, I think.
Ronan, that last point, I have to defend my void thing. I did not say that you can't describe something that cannot happen or that something that doesn't exist. I said that particular epistemic void is something that we can't describe because we wouldn't be there to describe it. That's completely different. You're taking ourselves out, the observer's gone.
I'm with you on that. In my jargon, I would say it's incapable of instantiation, and therefore it cannot exist as an experience.
Okay.
So yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
Yeah, the other point I just want to chuck in is that whenever we have knowledge of something, there has to be continuity as well, because we can't have something that we know about for like a point in time, because that's just nonsense. We can only have continuity and say, oh, I know about this thing, if we have at least two or a series of experiences from which we extract a pattern. So whatever we know about can never be the experience of knowing about it. It can only be like a view of the sea from an aeroplane. You're just seeing the waves. You can't actually get in it. So this is another very interesting area, I think, the nature of continuity, and how continuity is necessarily superficial compared with the experience. Anyway, I'll stop there because that's ages.
I will get back to your hidden pen, but I don't want to stop other people from talking now, because I do have something to say about that. Thank you, Ronald. Terry.
Wait, excuse me,
Yes.
Ron, again, very short question. Ronald said that everything that we experience is actually nothing can exist if you don't experience this. But some people, for example, saying they experience God. So does God exist if they experience it?
Can I answer that? My answer is yes.
I agree.
Yeah, if I experience something that I call God, then that's existence. What's wrong with that? I don't see what's wrong with that at all.
Saying that does we have answer to this question, and actually it seems like we have. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah.
No. At this point, I agree with Roland. Of course, it exists. If you imagine it, it's for you. It doesn't need to exist for the world. That's a complete different story. Terry, at last, welcome.
Everybody, it's good to see everyone.
Yeah, very
A lot of
nice.
faces I haven't seen for a while. Not much has been going on in the world since we last met.
That's true. Nothing at all.
Nothing
Same
at all.
world, same people.
Defend David Deutsch, which I certainly don't. I think he's wasted billions of dollars on a completely fictitious approach to quantum computing. But I think he's talking more about information as opposed to knowledge. And I make a sharp distinction between those two. For me, even space and time are forms of knowledge. If you don't have an observer, you cannot define even space or time. It's easy to think you can, but you're really pretty much fooling yourself. You have to have some kind of sentient observer to construct these rather complicated things, and they are complicated, that we call space and time. I think Roland was hitting on some of that and talking about the need for careful distinctions. You cannot conceive of space unless you have stability of what happens around you, and that's not a given. Not a given at all. In fact, it's rather remarkable that a universe does provide that. And the way it provides it is incredibly complicated through a process called fermions. Fermions have properties that can't be explained, and from those properties arise the ability to persist, or what we might call information. So I do make a distinction that I think Deutsch in that case was talking more about information. Deutsch, especially with I can't remember her name, the lady that he's been working with lately. Oh my gosh, they essentially put a deity into every point in space-time. And then the deities all get together and decide, we'll limit ourselves down to doing this. And to me, that is just the epitome of where mathematical science has stripped out of reality and just gone off into kind of bonkers land of postulating information is free, everything's free, no cost, just do whatever you want to. And then, of course, you wind up eventually with just deities in every point. What else is going to happen, if you take that approach? So I'm not a big fan of that approach. I think the experimental side, quantum mechanics, is extremely severe. It does not allow us to do infinite information in points in space unless we put infinite information and infinite energy into that space. So why don't we just listen to experiments on points like that? I don't know, because people like the math, and it's a lot of fun to talk about multi-worlds. So, but you don't see them experimentally ever. And all the history of science, we don't see that stuff. And the quantum mechanics, quantum computation has been probably one of the most expensive disproofs of Deutsch's ideas ever done. billions of dollars made to point that the original premise about 15 qubits could calculate every solver problem imaginable. It just wasn't true. And then there's all sorts of reasons for saying it doesn't matter. But the bottom line was the premise was wrong. It didn't work. Then they call it, they kind of blame it on the engineer to do some stuff like that. So at any rate, my comment on that, I think we should make a firm distinction, but I think I'm very much with Ron when I say that. To me, if you talk about time, you just talked about an observer. If you talk about space, you've just talked about an observer. You are not talking about an inherent characteristic of the universe itself. You're talking about a construct that the universe nicely supports through things like invariance and allows us to do that. But to say that those are the same thing is very dangerous, and it leads you to thinking like Deutsch, where you just populate space-time with everything. Space-time doesn't exist. Most of you have an address book. Maybe you have an old paper address book. You've got a bunch of relationships in that address book. Is that a space? Is that a real space? Can that space of your addresses in your address book spontaneously generate new space-time address books? The answer is no. It's just a bunch of relationships. It's your address book account. Space and time work a lot like that too. You cannot define its features without having observers and things moving around and doing things. AI, since
Oh dear.
you quoted me in
I knew I'd get you on that.
Increasingly, I refuse to even acknowledge a large language model as AI.
Terry, could we talk about that a little later? Because it's a very long, big, huge subject. Is that all right with you?
Yep.
I just want to say that I only see what you type in there, your chat, only afterwards. So I really like you to do it where everybody can hear it, but if you don't, that's okay. But
I haven't typed any comments.
No, not you. No, not you. Generally, no, don't start now. I just noticed you talked about the observer, and I see what Christina wrote, and usually she speaks so nicely, but sometimes she prefers to type, which is okay. But she did write, you can talk about death. Now, Christina, you've got to listen to me very carefully when I talk. What I said was, you can't discuss what it is to be dead. To be dead, you can't describe it. We can describe death, yes, about everybody else apart from ours. And so that's very important, and that jives in with what Terry said. You need an observer, and unfortunately, when you're dead, you don't have that observer around to tell you about it. So I just wanted to mention that, because that just crossed my vision. Okay, but that's important. I think the observer is very important. Okay, Ak, are you back, Ak? There must be a song.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, yes. Do
Yes,
you have
thank
do you have
you.
a video thingy?
No, I don't have a camera. Sorry.
Okay.
Initially, my microphone was acting up. So I just wanted to touch really quickly on the initial topics. So I have a proposition that answer and questions are the same thing by invoking the law of polarity from the Kabbalion. And that basically means that a question and answer are at two separate poles, and you can use a slider and slide between the two, where one question becomes more like an answer, or an answer becomes more like a question, and something in between. I don't know what it would be called. Maybe it's harmony or a statement. It would turn to the statement itself, or the truth. I would say truth is what it would be. At the same time, using cause and effect, which I think the previous speakers were mentioning as well. You can think of a question as a cause, and then an answer as an effect. And if you say, okay, there are parallel universes, then you can say, okay, maybe a question was an answer in another universe, and answer from there was a question in ours. So I just wanted to bring that up. Just quickly touching on AI, I just wanted to say that AI as well, I don't think it's truly intelligent. once it reaches self-preservation, I guess you can at that point say it is truly artificial intelligence. And then just to put you at ease, Ron, I just wanted to say that knowledge is just organized thought. And since thought is some sort of energy, and isn't energy unlimited, so based on that, I wouldn't be too concerned about not gaining knowledge or loss of the abilities to store knowledge, because it will always be present in the ethers. And just going back to the chicken question, I like that question, but the question I wanted to answer was what came first, the chicken or the egg? The question itself that you presented in this topic was, I don't think the chicken ever crossed the road or will ever cross the road. And the reason for that is because road is a human construct. And for the chicken itself, it must be thinking it's just walking on a big piece of rock and going about and doing its business. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, but you don't actually know what the chicken is actually thinking about the road. I mean, right? I mean, that's your assumption. I mean, you're assuming that the chicken does not see that as a road.
Yes, that is my assumption, because
Okay.
I'm assuming that a chicken doesn't have a comprehension of what a road is, and maybe road is the definition that is given by us human beings to make it
Okay.
easy for us to, and/or bicycles or people to walk on.
Okay, fair enough. Kerry, can I move over to Morris? Who hasn't spoken yet this time. Thank you, Morris.
All right. The first thing that I just got a few completely illogical and unconnected thoughts to express. The idea of the chicken crossing the road. Why? It isn't how did the chicken cross the road, and the question isn't when did the chicken cross the road. The question is why did the chicken cross the road, and the why is what I see as being a very important question that we should never ask about an awful lot of things. Let me leave that for a moment. I am very happy to see you, Ron. Haven't seen you for some time. And during the time I didn't see you, did you exist?
For you or for me?
For me. I mean, I have a memory of you. I have a memory of you from the last time I saw you. And I assumed that you existed. But for all I knew, you might have, I don't know, dropped down a hole and disappeared and didn't exist. But I'm very pleased to see you do exist.
I have a very long answer for that, by the way.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Actually, just again about the chicken. The chicken actually only went halfway across the road. We all know that because it was a Rhode Island red. But I'll leave that for one side. My interest in why is because I think that the question why is what lies behind all regrets that we have in life. If anybody has a regret about anything, it's always because, well, I think it's always because we say to ourselves, why on earth did I do that? Why didn't I do something else? The question why, when we apply it to ourselves, is a destructive, nasty, malicious question. Only causes trouble, brings about only regret. And therefore, I see the question why as in terms of a human being, in terms of human beings, as being a question we shouldn't ask.
Why?
Well, there you are, you see. Or as they say, don't ask. But because regret, guilt, bad feelings about the past always arise out of why. After all, I said to myself several times during this evening, why did I join this Zoom meeting this evening? And I am capable of giving several answers to that question. They're probably all right and all wrong, but there is no answer. Why did I join the Zoom meeting this evening? Because I thought it was a good idea at the time, because I've enjoyed previous meetings, because I wanted to see all these faces again. Well, there's endless answers to why, and yet none of them has any real meaning for me. I can ask the same question about anything I've done in my life. And I can have many answers to those same questions. All of those answers lead nowhere. So the question of why did the chicken cross the road? Well, I'm not interested in chickens, but I'm interested in the idea that the question why, in terms of human beings, is just not a good question to ask and should be avoided as far as possible. That's really what I want to say at the moment.
Okay, that's interesting. What happens if I ask, why am I such a good person?
You're asking me why you are such a good person?
No, I'm asking what about the question that is a why, which you said is a pretty bad question. I'm saying, well, look, I'm a really great person. Now, why am I such a good person? For example.
Yeah.
That's a good question about why, isn't it?
No, because then you're going to end up by being big-headed about something. You're going to tell me that I am a good person because I'm so kind to other people and I'm so respectful of my betters. And well, I would be better off not to ask the question. Just go on being a good person.
Okay, fair enough. I forgot now what I wanted to argue with from the beginning.
I'm very pleased.
No, you should be. Actually, trust me, you should be. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Morris. Kerry, can you? Oh no, I've already asked you once. No, it's okay. Go on, because Anton hasn't spoken yet today.
Okay, well, we can let Anton go first.
Yeah, is that all
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. You could, I
Sorry,
mean,
that's
you
the
could go
second
if you
time.
want to, Gary. I understand you're being nice, Ron, but like, I don't know. Both of us have been waiting a little while, so.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, I kind of like updated I'm writing down some thoughts during this, but like, it's not necessarily the words that are used. I'm realizing even as I was writing this, but earlier it was occurring to me. So is knowledge another word for information, or is it another word for experience? These are a couple of words that have been thrown around. Or is knowledge another word for understanding? Because I think, or at least this is the way I'm interpreting what you're saying, Ron, if there has to be an observer or a awareness in order to understand something, then I would agree with that. However, if it's information, or possibly you could use the word experience, I'm kind of less leery of using that in terms of just something happening. It either has happened or it is happening, then I don't think that it doesn't seem like there has to be an observer for that. Present tense or past tense. So, but as far as what Roland was saying in terms of how can we know, I think he's right that when we think about, like, for example, an animal's experience or something outside of us and trying to imagine what that experience is, At least a lot of times I project my own experience onto that. So I agree with that. But something like intuition, which I know is not necessarily easy to define, is something that I think it seems that that's how you can know certain things, or you can get a sense of something. I'll just use the word sense through intuition. But so that would be one way in which something can be known, not only from one's own limited perspective. If that is true, it does seem to be sometimes the case for myself. I don't know if all knowledge or experience or information is testable in a tangible way. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But and intuition seems like an example of something that's not fully, if at all, tangible, but it does exist. Those are some thoughts that I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting points. The connection to knowledge, intuition is a very dodgy one. You have an intuition. Do you know what you intuit? I don't know.
It could be a good question to say, if you intuit something, does that mean you know it?
Yeah.
Does being intuitive mean you know something? I think that's a good question.
Yes, it is a good question, actually. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Where are we? Where did he disappear to?
Oh, I'm still here. I think Zoom dropped my hand.
Oh, I can see you now. Okay, Gary, you disappeared again. Stop moving around. Oh, there you are. Oh, God.
I'll just wave.
You've got to stay where you are. Okay, sit. Everybody's moving now. Stay where you are. Kerry, you moved in the middle. Go before you disappear. If you talk, you won't move. Talk. Go.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna go. So for those who aren't familiar with it, Thomas Nagel wrote an article called "What It's Like to Be a Bat," which is a great precursor to why the chicken crossed the road.
True.
Christina, I've got to call her out for her statement in the chat. Language is a guess. I really like that, and I'm going to be thinking about that a lot, I think, later on today. And then I wanted to just kind of pick up where Roland left off, because I really liked kind of where he was going. So, Ron, I have a proposition for you, and I'm hoping this squares with your worldview. And then if it does, I then have a question for you. We experience the knowable world, or maybe it's our knowable world, and our knowledge is limited to that experience. Is that a fair statement?
I'm with you on that.
Okay. To me, this sounds very similar, maybe a different spin on that famous Wittgenstein statement. What we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence. The funny part about that is he says, we must, except we never do, right? All we do is talk about things that we shouldn't talk about, I suppose. And here's my question. What are we doing when we do that?
There's a pregnant silence now.
Well, I don't have an answer. I'm just going to leave it there. It was just, just a short question. But when we are talking, and that's why I like Christina's formulation there. Are we just guessing, or is there a better word for that, or is it just nonsense? In the the breakdown of the word, nonsense. But we sure do it. We're really good at it, apparently. Or when we utilize language, are we just creating a new form of knowledge, even though it's not necessarily what we think it is, which is an odd thing to say in and of itself. So I'm going to leave it there before I dig myself a hole I can't get out.
No, it's a very good. It's a very good question. I wonder the same thing often. What are people? There's this spouting stuff. They just sit there and stuff comes out, and you think, what the hell? And what's going on here? Why? How? Just keep quiet, but they can't. People can't keep quiet. They just can't. It's got to come out. It's got to come out. The junk is pouring out. I agree with you. I also don't understand. Basically, yeah, I agree with you. I don't understand what's going on. Is it to pass over knowledge? Obviously not, or maybe they think it's knowledge. Maybe think they're right. Does everybody always think they're right? Maybe they do, or maybe they don't even think. Maybe it just comes out. So yeah, very good question. Where are we? Richard, can I let Dennis, can I let Dennis in before you? He hasn't spoken at all.
Yes, indeed. I don't think I was the next person. I don't know why I came
I
up.
don't know. I've got your hand up on the left, but people keep on moving around.
But I
It's
think
horrible.
Debbie and Dennis were before me.
Dennis and Debbie haven't yet spoken.
That's right.
So Debbie's okay if I let Dennis in. Is before you anyway. If he doesn't move around. Okay,
I would
Dennis.
prefer to give Debbie talk first.
Okay, if you prefer that, Debbie.
Okay. I'm think perhaps maybe to take the talk into a different discourse, or perhaps even first to refer to the name of the title of the Zoom, The Spice of Life. Our questions, the spice of life. And that reminded me the famous quote of Socrates, who said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So perhaps seeing questions, or the existence of questions, are not primarily there to get to definite answers, but it is, or the way I see it, it is a process, a journey towards enlarging the corpus of our knowledge in order to get to perhaps answers, but not only. This is not a necessary way, perhaps, for a question, that the actual questioning is, I find, that has more value than actually finding the answer. So I'm kind of taking the discourse more into a more social context, not so much metaphysical, but to ask what is the aim in actual questioning, and how do we see the perhaps philosophy, where the questions, or asking what questions are, where this actual question exists. It also reminds me what Olga, you were talking about existence. Do I exist? Humans, or do I exist? And also the existence, instead of, I was thinking of talking about, referring to the word existence, the term existence, not so much in the metaphysical, can we prove existence, but perhaps more in a Marxist question of what does it mean for humans to exist materialistically in the world? What does it mean to actually exist and be in the world as a human, as a social being, as a being who has rights and duties, or a being that has an effect on this world, whether it exists or not. But this is a discourse that I find interesting, and the questions us as and the asking the questions not only as a journey, as the actual method of inquiry, of it is actually practicing our humanity. This is a practice of what it means to be human, to talk, to inquire, to ask questions. I know Morris didn't like the why, but perhaps what about questions of what? What is the right thing to do? I think perhaps this is always a question that we need to ask, and that is a mirroring or an implementation of what it means to be human, what it means to be a social human, and what it is to be a social political human in this world that hasn't changed at all, as we just said, since we last met. So that was my big shift into a completely different domain of discourse. So that was my 2 pennies of thought.
Thank you very much,
The
Debbie.
spice of life.
Thank you. The spice of life. Okay, thank you very much. That's a very, very, very interesting. Thank you. Dennis, welcome to this is the first time, isn't it, Dennis, that you're here?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So firstly, I would like to start with answering the questions that Debbie answered. I don't know, was it just rhetorical questions or it is a question that's supposed to be answered, but as I understand, modern world is more about like parallel spaces, and in these parallel spaces we can find different answers, and number of answers will be the same with the number of these spaces. So second one is about chicken. As I understand, it is like, why did the chicken cross the road? As I understand, it is a kind of metaphor. Maybe I didn't understand it correct, but it is a kind of metaphor to the question why some like being do some path. Is it correct?
Well, sorry, what was the question again?
Why some being do some path? So for example, why do I live this life, or why do I take this cup right now, or like why do I do something? Do I understand this question correct or not exactly?
I think what he means is, what is this whole story of why did the chicken cross the road even getting at in the first place? What is this metaphor trying to address at all? I think that's Dennis' question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my English. Yeah.
No worries. Just clarifying question about what's this whole thing about the chicken crossing the road in the first place? What this meant to point at?
Why I put it in was it was the most stupid question I could think of.
Okay.
So I put it in to show you, or to show at least that any question can be examined, and you can find things in there that are far beyond the stupidity of the actual words themselves. And we had talked about it. It's a cause and effect, and it's whether we know what it means for a chicken to do whatever it's doing, or what anybody is doing, what they're doing. It could be cause and effect. It could be anything. So basically, yes, I used it as an example to open the discussion, to show that things are not that simple or not that stupid. Well, sometimes they're more stupid, but that's something else.
Okay. So anyway, I will. I think I got pretty close to the meanings that you put inside of this question, and I think the chicken crossing the road, because otherwise, because if chicken doesn't cross the road, it just stops. So it got just two how to say it, two types of being: crossing the road and don't crossing the road. But anyway, I also got another one answer. You said about where the knowledge start, as I remember, and as I understand, according to your logic, because you asked, it was a conversation with Olga, where knowledge start. I guess knowledge start with the knowledge start with the time when nowhere obtains this knowledge. Otherwise, it is not a knowledge; it is information. Just pretty quick touch to AI. I guess right now AI definitely doesn't approach our level of understanding environment. Definitely because basically it is just adaptive system that adapt to give answers that adapt to give answers according to samples that we feed to this system. But I think that humans work like in very similar way, because we are just adaptive systems that got self-awareness, and if it is just the one thing that separate us from AI and everything else that can do some algorithms, it is a yeah, that's pretty much it, I guess. It is if it is just one single thing that separate us from AI and all other beings. So, for example, from a dog that doesn't have self awareness, or maybe just cannot explain self-awareness. So it is kind of, in my understanding, it is kind of chauvinism towards the dog or AI, as I understand it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. If you're not agree with some of my theses, I would like to listen your arguments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm pleased to have you with us. Nick, you wanted to?
Hey. Yeah, I made a list of a number of points that were in the room. Some I could attach a name to, but forgive me if there's some noises there. If I missed some of the names. So one, I think, Roland, I wanted to speak to the point raised by you about this instantiation. I found this quite interesting, the way you approach that. If I got it right, though, and that's actually my question, you assume some kind of external reality that can validate whether the knower's knowledge is actually knowledge. Maybe you can speak to that. I see you're in the queue already. But apparently, when you say there's an instantiation of the pen that fulfills the criteria, sort of it's actually there. Effectively, to me, in my understanding of your saying, you assume that there's an independent external world that can, in some sense, at some point, sort of validate that collection of information in the knower's mind, whatever that is in that model, is actually knowledge. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. If that is the case, then I would ask the question is, okay, if you have the good old phrase of cogito ergo sum, where I can only know that I think so I am, then there would be sort of no externality that can actually confirm that knowledge to be knowledge. So I wonder, what would you do with that? But if I misunderstood and you don't assume an external independent world, a reality, then maybe that question doesn't come up. But so I throw that into the pool, and then I wanted to say that I think that intuition is a form of knowledge. It's just encoded somewhere else than in the conscious mind, or I think knowledge can sit in my biologically, even in my muscles, because the cells have a certain affinity to perform certain motions that they have been trained towards, and that is sort of just encoded in a different way. So knowledge can be encoded in various ways, and when we have an intuition, then like a pianist that is playing the piano does not think about every single key that they're pressing. Somehow they have developed an intuition how the music should flow and how they should use their fingers, their muscles to actually play the tune. But that information has to come somewhere, right? So it is somewhere there. It's just intuition is a way of how I think knowledge is encoded and accessed that is different from the way when we speak about the rational mind, right? So to me, therefore, intuition definitely is a form of knowledge. And yeah, I'm going through a few points, so they're up for grabs. So, but just stop me. I take another minute or so. Is that I do think there's such a thing as a bad question. So it doesn't mean we have to slaughter the person and absolutely put them on the spot when they raise the question and kind of, but I do think there's bad questions, because when a person raises a certain kind of questions, it may show that the person has simply not understood the subject matter, right? So also there can be questions which can be misleading. So they could trick the person who is supposed to answer in a direction that will completely, lead to different topics or digression. So in a sense, therefore, I think there's bad questions. It could be it could be logically incoherent and so on. So I think there's such a thing as bad questions, but we should be always brave and raise any questions, because we should be friendly with each other. And even if someone raises a bad question in a classroom, we shouldn't, bully them for that. But that's all a different topic. Okay, I have more on my list, but I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting points. Roland, you can answer him if you want to.
Yeah, certainly. It was a good inference, but I don't maintain the idea of an external reality as an objective thing. I don't see it of any use at all. That's probably a bit of a controversial viewpoint, but I cannot see the value of anything that cannot be got to by some kind of experience. And the problem with an objective reality is that it requires, as a basis for that concept, an impossibility. In other words, something that is ostensibly observable and yet no observer to observe it. So we're back to something that we've already discussed at this meeting. So now, the reason I say I don't think it's necessary to consider it as a fundamental part of what things are like is because I think there's a better solution, which is the future. So whenever we try to model to model what we call reality, what are we really trying to do? We're just trying to be better anticipators. We're trying to guess what's going to happen next. And so the real kind of the essence of what we're seeking to do is to bring the future into the present. We're trying to model the future. We're making an assumption that something is going to happen to us, and we want to know what, so that maybe we can deal with it in anticipation, and therefore make something happen. So I think it's actually possible to take the whole idea of objective reality and scrap it, and instead replace it with the idea of the future, the idea of simply an assumption that the future will happen. And then you don't actually need anything outside at all. You need the future. Something might happen. And this way of looking at it tallies much more closely with what I seem to see as the fundamental principles behind our perception, namely that they have to be observer-centric. So it has to be on the basis of what happens to us. It has to be within our awareness that things happen. So that's the way I look at that side of things. There's a couple other points I wanted to make as well about why, which Morris made and then Debbie followed up on. I think in some ways, why is a causation thing, isn't it? So why did this happen? And it is a real problem because any event that one takes, one can establish a massive whole load of whys for, and none of them will be right. None of them will be, oh yes, that is the reason. So I can take one example I think I might have used before. I can take a piece of steel and a hammer and an anvil, and I can whack that piece of steel, and there's a dent in it. Why is there a dent in that piece of steel? Well, because I hit it with a hammer. That's one explanation. But that dent wouldn't be there unless I had moved the hammer to hit the metal. So something about my actions is causative. And the dent wouldn't be there unless the anvil was there either, because if there was nothing to resist the metal, it would have just flown off into the distance. And everything the anvil's sitting on as well. And then I have to ask, well, how did I get to pick up the hammer in the first place? Where was the energy source behind that? You know, that cheese sandwich I ate earlier must be instrumental in making this dent on the metal. So the problem with all this is that there's no end to it. At some point, if you say, this is why this happened, you actually have to draw a line and say, I'm not looking below that line. So it's an interesting thing. The moment we ask why, we are actually inviting ourselves to ignore wholesale everything that happens before the thing that we are attributing to be the cause. It's a really strange thing on one level. So one of the interesting questions, I suppose, is why do we do that? Why do we seek to draw a line in our timeline of memory and go, I don't want to think about anything that happened before then. This is why. And I think I won't bother to explain my views on that at the moment because it'll just take ages. But I think this is very closely related to what I might call purpose. We select causes because we can then use that cause in order to pursue some kind of purpose. But it's not really the cause of anything. It's simply a set of circumstances we pull out of the air in order to assist something else happening. So I think on one level, this question why is a little bit like an error message. It comes up when we don't really know how to deal with something. So I can kind of see where Maurice is coming from there. We can ask ourselves, oh, why did I do that thing? Because we have, for some reason, picked up a stick and we're threatening to beat ourselves with it because we might have done something else, for example. Or we point to someone else and say, why do you do that? For the same reason, we're trying to perhaps attribute guilt, responsibility, or whatever, all of which are completely irrational on one level, and yet they are apparently human traits. Maybe we're just, when we ask ourselves these questions, we're just looking for a way of getting over them and stopping asking the questions. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Roland. Yeah, the why is a problem. But when you mentioned all the things that you cause and effect, it's even worse than that because of the chaos theory. That things can happen that we have no idea what it was. That the most tiny thing can change your whole life. You don't even know it. Right? That makes it even worse.
I think the whole area of causation is a nightmare because it tends to be polarized into people who believe in free will and people who believe in determinism. But both of them have the same problem in that they're both pattern-based ideas. They're both attempts to turn an analog continuum into a sort of digital landscape and then identify a pattern of causation through it. But both of them, I think, are deeply flawed ideas. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Before I get back to Nick, my big question of the evening is, how do I stop somebody getting into this conversation? How would I know when somebody's in the waiting room, like that terrible fellow we had in the beginning? How could I possibly know who that is if it's not somebody who's replied to me, who's seen it somewhere else and coming in? I have the waiting room, and that should answer the question, but it doesn't. I suddenly realized this evening. So what? You've got a waiting room. You've got a lunatic in there. So you can all think about that question. Let me know for next time, because it's worrying. It really is. Okay. Nobody's ready with the answer. Nick.
Well, I guess, like we said earlier, still have probability. So if there's a high probability that there is a lunatic and the meeting already has been going on for a while, then, you can act on that. But
that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole
You mean in
different
statistics? Somewhere somebody's going to come in and do something. Terrible.
Yeah, actually, maybe what I want to say next actually alludes to what we have in the room already, and Roland, also what you said is actually what I'm not clear about is for those who are so convinced that, knowledge requires a knower that is somehow conscious, you haven't actually fully provided an explanation of that mechanism that is actually behind this. So if you have the knower as one entity, a thing that exists, and then the knowledge somehow, I don't know, within it, I presume, then what's the actual mechanism that creates this dependency between knowledge and knower that you claim that is so vital or, critical for knowledge to exist in the first place? So if you say there can't be knowledge without a knower, then please explain to me what actually creates this dependency even in your own logic. So that's what I would be curious about. It seems to be more reasonable to assume that knowledge in a system, a system is like anything that has components that can interact with each other, that it exists and patterns evolve and rules evolve by which these patterns exist without any conscious activity seems to be more reasonable than assuming this God of the gaps idea of consciousness doing the rest of it, So you seem to be thinking then, or really relying on this idea of this assumption that consciousness is actually a real thing, and also without actually acknowledging that this is actually a matter of heavy debate, that we could be kind of, zombies that, have kind of a clockwork mechanism by which we operate that makes us say things like I'm conscious without being conscious. And that could also be the case, that you're just part of the machinery that is made, to say that they're conscious without actually having an inherent understanding or inner life in the first place. So without answering these questions, what makes you so confident that knowledge without a knower is impossible?
Well, for a start, you're actually talking about it. So you're an observer. Now,
how do you know that? I could be just a clockwork mechanism that is moving its mouth and making sounds.
It doesn't matter. You are the observer.
Okay.
Right? Now, if you're not, where is the knowledge and who is the knowledge from? If you don't know about the one who knows, you don't know about it. Where is this knowledge and who is it for? I can't see the connection between not being, not existing, and knowledge existing that nobody knows about because there isn't anybody. What does it mean?
So you have it. So can you find a different way of describing knowledge without using the word knowledge? And that's not just to play a trick on you. This is just to tease out what your understanding of knowledge actually is. Because if knowledge effectively is just synonymous with consciousness, then effectively, you're saying logically that consciousness cannot exist without consciousness.
No.
If knowledge is actually factually equivalent to consciousness, if you know what I mean, if you're just wrapping the idea of consciousness into knowledge and then you say knowledge can't exist without consciousness, then you're basically saying that logically saying consciousness can't exist without consciousness, which is self-evident. So
knowledge means knowing, right? Do you agree with that?
I can't agree with that because, then I would also ask who's knowing.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm asking you.
And that's because it's how you define knowledge in the first place.
You're saying that nobody needs to know, but knowledge exists.
Yeah,
where? How? What? When?
Okay, then we need a definition. So to me, can you give an example of what knowledge is to you? Any example?
Well, I'm here to tell you because I know. If I'm
An
not
example
here,
of a knowledge item. What is an item of knowledge in your what would be an item of
no,
knowledge?
it's knowing. You're talking about knowing. Knowing means, yes, Adriana, I'm coming to you in a sec. I'm trying to get round not existing, and yet there's knowledge and there's nobody to know.
No, but give a specific
where is it?
example. So is there a car? I know there's a car, or give a specific.
You know, exactly. You're the observer. Now give me an example when you're not around at all. Give me an example of knowledge with you, or you knowing about knowledge. You telling me about knowledge. Now disappear. You don't exist. Now what?
Okay, you're taking knowledge itself as an example, which makes it complicated. But can you give an example of when do you know
being
something?
complicated. It's not an easy topic.
I look for a specific example. So would you say, I know there is a cup? Is that what you describe as me knowing that there is a cup? Is
Well,
that
obviously,
knowledge?
if you know there's a cup, you know there's a cup. Whether I know it or not is something completely different. But you can't
I
know.
don't want to hold up. I don't want to hold up the meeting. I will digest the moment.
Okay, no, fair enough. Adriana.
I was trying to wrap my head around the same thing as Nick is trying to get into, to get you to compare what is knowledge versus information. Because if I've been thinking this whole meeting of knowledge as mostly information, like there is knowledge in the pyramids and I didn't know they exist for most of my life. There is knowledge in the cloud, all that, and it will be after the humankind disappears. It will still be there, at least for a while.
No.
Is that knowledge or?
No, sorry. If there's something there that we don't know about, it does not exist. It just doesn't. Because you have to, I mean, how does something exist that you don't know about?
That's only semantics. That's only playing on the semantics of the word to know.
No. No with an N, not with a K. The point is, for something to exist, it has to exist for something.
No, obviously the cup doesn't exist anymore because no humans exist who can call this collection of matter a cup. Already the term cup cannot be used. There's no one to use it. In a sense, then what remains is a collection of matter. That is, no one will talk about it as a cup. But it doesn't mean that this collection of matter is not somehow still present in reality only because the human species doesn't exist.
I don't care what you call it. You can call it an elephant for all I care. But it exists because you know it exists. If you don't know it exists, it does not exist. Right? There are millions of people in the world that don't exist for you.
Okay, let's take the cup world. The world with the cup is a world, and let's subtract things step by step and see if it still exists. Okay, so we have the cup, and we have nothing in the universe. We have the universe, and we have a human in the cup in this whole world. So the cup exists, you exist, because the human looks at the cup. So let's remove one thing. Let's remove the human, and there's the cup in the container.
No,
Does the cup still exist or
no?
not?
When you remove the human, there's no cup.
So what happened? How did the cup get destroyed?
I mean, how can you talk about a cup existing when there's nobody around?
Well, I just constructed a world. I'm using Lewis here, a little bit alluding to Lewis, yeah, to David Lewis. You construct a world with a container, that is the world. You put in a human and you put in a cup. Then you say, now the cup exists. Now you're telling me that if I remove the human from the container, that I also have removed the cup, because you're saying the cup doesn't exist.
I did not.
So why could I not just remove the human and leave the cup in there?
Well, leave the cup for what? How? Where? What? Who?
No,
what does it exist
okay, maybe
for?
someone can help me out. I don't.
No,
I tried.
no, I'm trying to show you that if you remove the human, there's no cup.
But how? I just left the cup in the container.
Where is
the
it?
whole world, if you make a whole world, the whole entire reality, and you say this is the container. Guys, I stop. I promise I stop. I wanna stop. You have this container. This is the entire reality right here. You put in there a cup and a human, two objects in the container. You remove the human. Now you're telling me the cup isn't there anymore. Why?
The cup is not there for you or for anybody. It's not there. It doesn't exist.
So there's no cup in the container.
Maybe for
Of course, there's no cup if you're not. Pardon?
Maybe for other possible observers, maybe the cup remains there for the possibility of other observers at one point in time coming in and observing it.
When the observers come back, there'll be a cup.
Okay,
Yes.
could I say something? It's magic.
No, it's not magic. It's not magic. It's not possible for something to exist when there's nothing for it to exist for. It doesn't make sense.
Could I say something?
Could I say something?
Olga, yes, please. Sorry.
It's very short, and I'm not agree or disagree with it. I'm just trying to understand how Ron understands it. And probably it's like this. Yes, to put in the container cup and human, you removed human, and there is still a cup, but you cannot name it a cup. It's unknowable object, which is not understandable why it is, what it is, and you have to gain the knowledge of this object again. And it only makes sense for this human that be removed from it. So probably this is some kind of explanation, although I'm not sure it's correct. But the only meaning, this cup only have meaning for this human that we removed, so it does not exist anymore as a cup. It does exist as something that we don't know about anything.
No, you see, you mentioned we. We don't know. You mentioned we. Take out the we. No, we don't. There is no we. The cup, the is the secret. It isn't. It isn't. You have to be there to tell me about an is or an isn't.
I kind of try to understand how you are, how you see this situation when there is container cup and human, we remove the human is the cup. No, it's not, because we don't know anything about, only through the human we have some kind of knowledge of whatever it is. So I'm not sure if it's correct, but it's kind of my perception of it, and I'm not sure, I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with it, just how I see this situation. That's it.
Okay. Christina, you wanted to say something? Have you changed your mind?
Actually, I had a question, but I realized, when I was young, my father always said that my questions are stupid. So I ended up not asking questions anymore. But now I wanted to ask a question, and I realized it's a stupid question, and but still I will ask it, even though I know it's stupid. Why is this relevant to you? But I realize I have to think about maybe 10,000 years and get to the answer, because maybe it's a relevant question. This issue that you are all talking about for the last 3-4 minutes. Yeah, can you tell me why this is relevant to you, to know?
There are lots of things that are not relevant to me. Lots of things. This happens to be something that I'm interested in. It is about knowledge, and since knowledge, as far as I'm concerned, is the basis of existence. When the knowledge is gone, there's no existence. It's that simple, and it's not simple, but it's that simple. Now you can say, and people have and do, that existence comes before knowledge, but I just don't see how that's possible. Existence without knowing about it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Why is it relevant? Maybe I'm a lunatic. Maybe I like to talk about crazy things. It's possible. I'm not saying it. It's just interesting for me when I talk about knowledge, so how far I can go. And at one point when there's no knowledge, that's it. I mean, when you're dead, nothing exists for you, right? There's no point saying that when you're dead, things continue. They do for other people, but not for you. Yes, Adrian.
I was just looking, and thank you, Franji, for giving me the definition by ChatGPT of what knowledge is. So knowledge is the understanding, awareness, or familiarity gained through experience, education, or reasoning. So far, it's exactly what Ron says. It involves the facts, information, and skills acquired through learning and can be categorized. Here, we're diverging a little bit from how you interpret knowledge into theoretical knowledge, facts and principles, and practical knowledge, applied skills or expertise. I think that facts and principles can exist without an observer. Yes, you cannot apply them if there is no observer or somebody who is going to apply them, but
I do want to put in at this point that I'm not a great fan of looking things up in dictionaries in order to tell you what is right. Because if we rely on dictionaries, we wouldn't need to have any discussions. We just look it up. What is consciousness? Look it up in a dictionary. That's it. We can all go home. But there are thousands of papers being written about consciousness, and all they need to do is to look at a dictionary. It doesn't work that way. I mean, we wouldn't need this. We wouldn't need this meeting. We all bring a dictionary, look it up, and say, here it is. Okay, fair enough.
I agree, but then we should define at the beginning or define throughout at some point on how we interpret something, because otherwise each one is thinking at something different.
But that's a problem, because defining something actually pins it down, and that's it. There's nothing to talk about. The whole point of philosophy is defining something. What is consciousness? Then you talk about it for hours. Thousands of papers come out and books. What's consciousness? Right? They're just talking about it because it's a matter of how we define it. And I don't like the word define either, by the way, but I do have lots of problems regarding that. Roland, you got a hand up.
I have.
I can see a yellow hand.
I wondered whether there was a way of sort of, I don't know, trying to simplify the ideas here with a few metaphors. The concept that Nick mentioned, you have this created universe with the cup and the human. Can we just change it slightly to make it a drum and a human? So, and now the question is, what is the sound of that drum when there's no one to play it? Well, that becomes quite a different idea to what does the cup look like if there's no human there. The reason I mention this
is
as an idea,
the tree in the forest, does it make a sound?
Yeah, exactly. It's a similar idea. But here we have the notion that somehow or other it is the interaction between the human being and the drum that we're looking at. And this, I think, is the core idea we have here, that when we are talking about objects, things, knowledge, we are talking about interactions between human beings and what? Something. So the result of that interaction is a perception that human beings have. What tends to happen if we're not careful is we separate off the object as a separate thing without observing that, in fact, there is no thing. It is the interaction between human and whatever influence that creates the perception of a thing. So what you might like to think about as a collection of organized stuff in the absence of the human, we've got no way of knowing that there's a collection of organized stuff anywhere, because the essential part that creates the knowledge has gone from the system. Another example might be, okay, I have a violin and a bow, and I take my fiddle and I play a sound, a note, okay? Now, what is the sound of that note if there is no bow? Well, it obviously doesn't have a sound, but it goes worse than that. What does the violin sound like if it's not played? Well, you don't know. And what does the bow sound like? What is the influence of the bow on the violin if we just take the violin out of the picture? Well, we don't know that either. It's only the interaction between the two that then creates a sound, and then we can go, oh, there's that sound. But we can't actually distinguish between whether it's the bow or the violin making that sound. It's the combination of the two. And in the same way, when we are perceiving something, the perceiver is part of the process, that they are instrumental in constructing the perception. So if you remove the perceiver, you don't have a perception. Now, the temptation in the example Nick gave, you've got your artificial model in front of you, and you put your character, your actors in there, and then you take one of the actors away and go, well, look, the other one's still there. But the problem is, you're looking at it. So there's another actor, the audience. So when you're actually imagining that scenario, you've created an audience as well. And it's only because of the audience that you can even talk about the stage and the people on it. So you've apparently got rid of the observer, but you've actually kept him behind, looking at the scene. So it's a really difficult problem, I think, to get one's head around. But the key point is that it's the influence, it is the interaction between human, and influence that creates the perception. And that, I think, leads to Christina's question, which is, why do we even care about this? Well, to my mind, this is probably one of the most important questions ever, because this is the step. By actually taking this on board, that we are instrumental in the construction of our world, that makes a huge difference. Rather than being passive actors in a universal stage, we are part of the scenery, we construct the scenery, and we are responsible for that scenery. So, I mean, typical example of where that might be relevant is in relationships. You look at a person and say, oh, that person is always doing this to me. Well, what part do I have in that? I mean, this is basic psychotherapy or counseling, is how do we own responsibility for our experience, that when we see things in other people or in other situations that then have an impact on us? Do we realize that we are actually constructing those perceptions? And if we really do realize it, if we can take that on board, how can we deal with it? Can it make our lives better to know that? So to my mind, I think I'm not joking when I say this is, to me, the most important realization I've ever had. That's what I would say about it. It's not just theory. It's not just philosophy. This is practical stuff about living one's life and embracing the challenges that face us and seeing them as us in action. That's what I would say. So I think it's right up there at the top of things to think about. And I, for one, I've known Ron for years, and I am so grateful for the work he does around this, because it's very hard to get these ideas across. Really hard, and sometimes quite soul-destroying, because you're going, why am I even talking about this stuff when it's so difficult to think about? But I think it's, this is the stuff I would teach my kids, because I want them to grow up with capability and understanding about their capabilities, their interactions. That's the life that I want them to have. So I think it's important.
Thank you very
I'll stop
much,
ranting
Ronald.
now.
Thank you. Nick, if I may be so bold, if you can get hold of my book called Nothing Matters, you will see me putting it down in a better way than I can say it here, and you'll see how I work through this idea of not being around and what that could possibly mean. I started with that, but my next book will will be more or less what Roland was talking about, how important that particular thing is. It's essential. It's what makes us us, makes us anything. So, but I very, 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 very much appreciate all the stuff that you said this evening, Nick. Really, really appreciate it. And I hope you come for the next first Sunday of the month. What I do want to mention is that people change their names, so I can't write to them. I can't tell them anything because they've got different names from what they said they're coming on, through, by, and with. And I have a huge problem. I look at all the lists of people who said they're coming, and they just weren't there. So I don't know really who's here. You're all hiding, not all of you. Some of you are hiding under different names. So please let me know who you really are, or no, who you are when you're here. Let me put it that way. I don't know who you really are anyway. So, Nick, do you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I can make it quick because I feel you want to close the meeting as well. So, but
well, no, we've only been sitting here for 3 hours. It's okay.
No, I want to underline that, Roland, I actually 100% agree with you. Obviously, that model needs a lot of work, right? What does it mean to put in, what to take out? And I remain as the person having that thought experiment as an audience. I love what you said, and it's so true. And some paradoxa arise just because I'm just secretly transferring something that should be in the model, removing it, but it's actually still there because I'm actually looking at it. So I 100% agree. But I think it still shows that there's some potential in getting towards this issue, that we discuss, whether the cup exists or not. If there would be this would be a way of constructing thought experiments, I think that could maybe deliver some more clarity, I think. Because I think the work that it would need is, what does it mean to put something in or out? What does it mean to remove? Also, maybe we could draw the little man with the cup, but we could also draw a little cup in the man's head. That means that the cup is being perceived and so on. So that you could, play around with it a lot. But I agree that obviously there will be then loopholes somewhere. I will just maybe say that I think that more specifically to the answers, I think the mere fact that something can be constructed in a reality is sufficient for it to exist. So even if there's no cups in a given reality, cups as we know it, okay, for lack of words and terminology, that thing, entity, data is there. It doesn't, even if there's no cups in a given reality, if the reality is such that, or it features properties and processes that allow for a cup to get constructed, that is sufficient to saying that cups exist. And then it brings back a bit the term of instantiation. Whether an instance of a cup is actually present, that means that configuration of, that relation of, I'm lacking for words, information that we would then refer to as being a cup, whether it's actually such a configuration is there in that reality or not, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So it's like saying this, okay, let me say this, and then I close. I have 500 Lego bricks, right? They are all scattered around. I can build a certain kind of elephant-shaped thing with those Lego bricks. Whether I actually build that little elephant or not doesn't matter. I would say the elephant already exists if the mere fact is true in the given reality, that I can build from the scattered pile of Lego bricks. If it is possible, if it's a fact that it is possible to build that elephant, it's already there. All I need is the fact that it is possible. Whether anything has actually built the elephant or put it together or not, that does not matter for the question whether it exists or not. And in the same way, I would then go and argue that knowledge of the existence of the elephant also exists in that 100 Lego brick reality, because I can construct a pointer of, a piece of information that describes an elephant that exists, I could put the words together, elephant, from the Lego bricks, which would describe the elephant. And therefore, the elephant that I put together as a chain of words from the Lego bricks is the knowledge, and the actual elephant that I built from the Lego bricks is the thing that I know something about. But again, whether I actually do that with the Lego bricks or not doesn't matter. The knowledge and the elephant both exist because the potential to make them is there. It's a fact of that reality.
So you're saying that potential exists, potentiality exists, probabilities exist.
The mere fact that something in that sense can exist, for me, is already comprises its existence. Whether you actually make it or not, it doesn't matter. If you had a state of affairs where making a certain construction is impossible logically, then it doesn't exist.
No, it's a good point, except that you ignored and left out the word knowledge in all that.
No, when you put take the Lego bricks and you use the word, again, I'm using human, I know there's content. If I write down with the Lego bricks, I make ELAFANT, I have a description of an elephant, which is the knowledge to me.
Okay. So
if I make the actual elephant, this is the thing to be known about.
Well, I'm pleased we're back to knowledge anyway.
Okay, I stopped I talked a lot, so I want to be.
No, it was great. Thank you very much. Olga, have you got your hand up?
I just have a few very short questions. It's like first, you Ron, you even have book about art. So how it's knowledge and creation something that does not exist, it could not even be predicted? This question, what's in your system? What is this? What is art? What poetry is? Something that we could not even predict. And also Dominic, what he could say about it. I'm not asking you to say it right now. I'm just asking questions. And could we even complicate what we're talking about if we consider also a code, that something could be coded and exist as a code, as an algorithm, not as something like only as a potential? What is this? Is it knowledge? Is it object of what it is? You see, only as a potential. No, so it's just questions, but I'm not asking for answers. Just if you would like to discuss, maybe it's next time. That's it.
Okay. No, I do have answers for those because I have thought about this, but I won't go into it now. We'll have to have another light session like this one. I thought it was going to be a light one. It's only about questions after all. And Terry will have to speak about AI another time because it's
I'm not talking about AI. I'm talking.
I'm just talking to Terry about. I promised that we'll talk about it. That would take a long time, and we would possibly disagree. He disappeared, which proves it. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. It was delightful to have you all. I'm glad you made it, Samuel, at the end, and Eddie. And see you next time at the right time. Okay. So thank you, everybody, and it was a delight. And
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming, everybody, especially the new ones. I'll see you next time. And I hope, Christina, you thought that it was worth it. And if not, there's nothing you can do about it. All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody. Bye. See you next time.
Thank you. Rowan.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Could you send chat, please? Because I could not read and listen.
I will send it to you, yes. If you want to remind me, Would you send me an email and I'll send it to you?
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye everybody. See you next time. Bye.